My wife was 30 years old the first time she met a self-proclaimed atheist. For those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s, church wasn't just a choice. You didn't ask someone if they went to church. You asked them which one.
But that old default setting has been deleted. We're living through the fastest decline of organized religion in human history. By the end of this video, we're going to show how the vast majority of people didn't choose their religion, they inherited it. Why it's no longer a permanent contract, and why walking away isn't a failure. It's a global shift toward choosing what actually matters. Welcome to the Altarless Traveler, a space for those of us who've left the building but are still looking for the horizon.
Let's look at the math behind the Exodus. If you want to know what someone believes, don't look at their heart, look at their birth certificate.
According to the Pew Research Center, if your parents both shared a religion, there's an 80% chance you still carry that same label today. But that's if the parents shared a religion. If your parents had different faiths or no shared tradition at all, that number drops to around 55%. In those homes, the path to a different identity starts much earlier.
We like to think of our testimony as a personal choice, but statistically, it's mostly an inheritance.
It's sticky because we're biologically wired to trust our parents for survival. Don't eat those berries. Don't pet the lion. And God is the Trinity. All come from the same trusted source. To a toddler, theology isn't a philosophy. It's a safety manual. And we aren't talking about teenage angst here. The data looks at grown-ups. It compares the religion you were handed at age 12 to the person you became as an adult. We inherit our cathedrals just as surely as we inherit our eye color.
But the inheritance tax varies.
Take the historically black Protestants, the stickiest in the country with an 82% retention rate. Evangelicals are close behind at 74%, but then the drop-off starts. Mainline Protestants, they're down to 58%. And for Catholics, only 57% of those raised in the faith still identify as adults.
The grip is loosening, and it's the same story for the smaller groups.
Hindus lead at 82%, Jewish and Muslims hit 77%, but Buddhists, only 45% stay. Without constant converts, that path would basically vanish. This is where it gets interesting. The exception to the rule are the nones. From the 1970s through the early 90s, people with no formal religion stayed flat at 7%. For 20 years, the inheritance was safe. Then the dam broke. In 2007, it hit 16%. Today, it's 29%.
And these aren't people who are born into a blank slate. They are refugees.
41% of current non-religious were raised Protestant. 28% were raised Catholic.
They evaluated their inheritance and decided the math didn't hold up. And this isn't just an American quirk. In my travels, I've seen where the chain holds and where it snaps.
In a place like Saudi Arabia, religious retention is effectively 100% because leaving isn't an option. It's a place where your birth certificate is basically a pre-signed contract with the Almighty, and there's no way to unsubscribe. But look at Norway or the Netherlands, and you see the future. More than 50% there identify as none. Even in Brazil, the historic Catholic fortress, the number of nuns has tripled since the 1990s.
It seems like the stay-in-the-herd instinct is finally losing a fist fight with common sense.
In 1972, being raised without a religion was uncommon, and 2/3 of those kids eventually joined a church. But today, the math has pulled a complete U-turn. Now, 2/3 of people raised as nuns stay nuns. We've gone from a waiting room for religion to the fastest growing room in the house.
We are the first generation in history to see the accident of our own birth. Once you see the math, you realize that staying put is a habit, but leaving is an act of intelligence.
It turns out that once you've seen the world without the stained glass filter,
it's remarkably hard to put it back on.
For years, my family was a textbook good family. My wife and I were in the pews every Sunday, and our kids were altar servers, robes, incense, the whole 9 yards. We believed we were building a foundation for our kids, but while we performed the rituals inside, we were increasingly treating the faith like a museum outside. We'd visit cathedrals like Notre Dame or Milan, admiring the architecture belief without actually inhabiting it. We were tourists in our own tradition, and behind the scenes, the contract was being shredded by 3 generations at once.
I've told the story of why my kids walked away in a previous video. I'll put a link in the description and a card here. It's for anyone wondering if their kids are actually lost.
But the real house of cards for me was my parents. When I realized my mom had stopped going and my dad had followed suit, though he still mowed the church grounds for a while just in case, the ceiling just collapsed. My wife and I realized we were only there for the kids, and the kids were only there for us.
We were all holding up a roof that none of us actually wanted to live under. We weren't having a big falling out with God.
We just had a falling in with the truth. We traded a performance for a reality, and honestly, the air is a lot easier to breathe out here.
Leaving isn't a failure. It's success of honesty. We aren't just dropping out. We're opting into reality we actually believe in.
Maybe those old rituals were just the scaffolding. They helped us grow up, but they were never meant to be the house we lived in forever.
If you're feeling the weight of that inheritance tax or the chill of a ceiling that finally collapsed, I promise you are not alone. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what was the hardest part of your inheritance to let go. Until next time, keep looking to the horizon. Thank you.